The mirror had always been there, not prominently, not loudly, just present, a relic of my grandmother's life, tucked away in the darkest corner of the attic, draped in yellowing cloth that smelled faintly of cedar and forgotten memories. I had passed it countless times as a child, never giving it much thought. It was beautiful, yes, ornate gold frame, delicate carvings of roses and vines, but it had a quiet presence, the kind that whispered rather than demanded attention. No one in the family ever used it. My grandmother, who had owned it for over 70 years, kept it covered. She never explained why. Whenever I asked, she would smile enigmatically and say, "Some things are best left untouched, dear." It was the kind of advice children dismiss. I did. I climbed the creaking attic stairs on a stormy afternoon when curiosity, stronger than caution, took hold. The house smelled like wet wood and dust. The storm outside rattled the windows with gusts that made the walls moan. I stood before the mirror, brushing the cloth aside. And then it happened. My reflection shifted. I blinked. The storm outside didn't. The creaking attic didn't. Yet the image in the mirror wasn't my reflection. It was me, but not. I saw myself older, tense and broken in a way that no single day could create. My hairline was receding faster than it should, my eyes darker under the weight of sleepless nights. More importantly, I wasn't alone. My family surrounded me, faces twisted with distrust, anger, betrayal. I saw numbers, bank statements, debts, empty accounts, and the house I loved consumed by foreclosure signs. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't imagination. It was a future staring me in the face. My heart raced. The blood in my ear sounded louder than the storm. I stumbled back. For a second, I thought I had fainted, but the reflection stayed. A window into inevitability. I couldn't look away. I thought, this can't be real. But as minutes passed, it became frighteningly clear. The mirror had shown me something that would happen if I did nothing. Betrayal, financial ruin, a family ripped apart.
I didn't tell anyone at first. Who would believe me? My parents laughed when I talked about visions as a child. My siblings dismissed anything that sounded mystical. And even I doubted myself in the daylight. But the images haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces again. My brother's eyes cold. My sister's words sharp. My parents devastated. And worse, the arguments. The phone calls that ended in silence. The documents signed. Deals made behind my back. It wasn't just betrayal. It was financial collapse. A cascade of events I had already witnessed in full detail. I tried ignoring it. I thought maybe it was a trick of my imagination, stress manifesting into hallucinations. But every night, the mirror's call drew me back. I went again, under the guise of checking old family items. I uncovered something new. The mirror didn't just show me the disaster itself. It showed the pathway, how it would unfold, step by step. Mistakes made, decisions taken, subtle manipulations by people I trusted. It dawned on me. Knowledge was a curse. I had to intervene. I had to rewrite the future. The moral weight hit me. Could I manipulate the lives of my family, even if it was to save them? Could I preempt betrayal without becoming what I feared most? And what if trying to prevent the disaster made it inevitable? That night, I slept next to the mirror, or perhaps it slept next to me. I dreamed of numbers and names, debts stacking like shios across the walls, family gatherings twisted into confrontations. When I woke, the mirror reflected my panic perfectly. I made a plan, one that felt both desperate and necessary. I would observe every family member, track every financial move, intervene in small ways first, prevent minor errors before they spiraled into catastrophe. And above all, I would never tell them why. The truth would be too dangerous. As I descended the attic stairs, the storm outside had passed. The house seemed normal again, safe. But the knowledge I carried made every corner of the home feel like a threat. Every smile, every handshake, every casual conversation was a test. The mirror had shown me a future I desperately wanted to avoid, and now I was trapped in a preemptive game of survival. I realized, with a sinking feeling, seeing the future wasn't a gift. It was a responsibility that demanded sacrifice. I glanced back at the mirror. Its gold frame gleamed softly in the dim light. No words could escape its silence, but I knew this. It was watching, and it would not forget if I failed.
The days after the attic encounter were a haze of fear and obsessive planning. The mirror didn't just haunt me with images of catastrophe, it gave me the roadmap. Each reflection revealed tiny cracks in my family's decisions, hidden vulnerabilities in their choices, and subtle signs of manipulation that, if left unchecked, would eventually cascade into disaster. I began by observing everything, every conversation, every financial transaction, every casual remark. My brother, Matthew, had recently started managing a family investment account, and the mirror had shown me him signing a critical, disastrous deal with someone I couldn't trust. My sister Claire was about to loan a significant sum to a friend who would vanish with the money. Even my parents, usually cautious and grounded, had small habits that could accelerate the collapse, leaving bills unpaid, ignoring warnings, trusting the wrong advisors. I didn't sleep well. I didn't eat well. I felt like a detective trapped inside a ticking clock with knowledge of a crime yet to happen, and every glance back at the mirror reaffirmed the urgency. I needed a plan, not just for one act, but a series of interventions that could redirect the current toward a safer shore. My first attempt was small, a subtle intervention with Matthew. He was reviewing investment portfolios late one night when I appeared behind him, holding a stack of reports I had accidentally found. "Hey, I was going through some old statements," I said, forcing casualness into my tone. "Did you notice these discrepancies?" He glanced at the papers. A frown formed. "I have accounted for everything." I nodded. "Just double-checking. These numbers, they look off to me. Maybe a clerical error." I didn't mention what the mirror had shown. I couldn't. If I revealed the source, it would seem insane. Worse, I could be dismissed as paranoid, and he might double down on the decisions that would eventually ruin us. Matthew hesitated. That was enough. He revisited the calculations, unknowingly averting the first ripple of disaster. Next was Claire. The mirror had shown her naively signing the loan documents, the money disappearing within days. I created a small delay. A fabricated phone call from a bank requesting verification bought me 2 crucial days. Claire questioned the timing, but assumed the bank was slow. In reality, those 2 days gave me time to uncover red flags about the friend's true intentions. Each intervention weighed heavily on me. I was no longer a passive observer. I was manipulating lives, taking moral risks, and wrestling with the knowledge that even one misstep could accelerate the very future I hoped to prevent. The psychological toll. The mirror became both my ally and tormentor. Each night I returned to the attic, seeking clarity, guidance, or reassurance. Instead, it reflected not just the looming disasters, but also the emotional erosion I was experiencing. I began to notice changes in myself. Anxiety gnawed at my mind. Every phone call made my pulse race. Every family interaction felt like walking through a minefield. Sleep became shallow and fragmented, haunted by images of confrontation, betrayal, and financial collapse. I started keeping a journal, not of the events themselves, but of the emotional weight. How I felt about watching my family unknowingly approach destruction. How I felt about intervening in their lives without consent. How I feared the future might punish me for attempting to control it. The mirror never let me forget that the stakes were not abstract. It showed me future faces. A devastated mother clutching a foreclosure notice. A brother staring in disbelief at lost investments. A sister weeping over money gone. I began questioning my ethics. Was I truly saving them, or was I, by intervening, altering their natural choices and undermining their personal growth? Each preemptive action carried risk. Each interference was a double-edged sword. The mirror revealed the consequences of inaction, but never the consequences of action. Despite my careful interventions, cracks began appearing in unexpected ways. The mirror had shown me the general trajectory, but not every minor variable was visible. Life, even as I watched through its spectral lens, refused to obey complete predictability. One evening, Matthew confronted me about my constant presence around his work. "Why are you always hovering over me?" he asked, irritation rising. I smiled, forcing normalcy. "I'm just concerned about family finances. Double-checking, nothing more." He frowned, but let it go. Small victories, small failures. The balance teetered constantly. Then came the first unanticipated betrayal. Claire, despite my warnings and subtle delays, confided in a friend she trusted implicitly, a friend who had intentions I hadn't predicted. Within days, a large sum disappeared. Panic surged through me. I had mitigated part of the disaster, but the mirror's reflection had been clear. This loss was catastrophic. I returned to the attic, staring at the mirror in desperation. Its reflection showed me another step, more subtle, more dangerous. This time it wasn't just financial, it was emotional. The betrayal had set off a chain reaction: arguments, suspicion, mistrust. The family cohesion, once strong, was fraying. I realized the depth of the challenge. Preventing disaster wasn't enough. I needed to rebuild trust, manipulate circumstances without exposure, and repair relationships on the fly. Each step required precise timing. I contacted old family friends, gently orchestrating advice and warnings. I intercepted emails, rerouted messages, and created the illusion of chance interventions. Every day was a tightrope walk. One slip and the future the mirror had revealed would accelerate into reality. Meanwhile, the mirror continued to show me glimpses of myself, older, more anxious, sleepless. My physical appearance mirrored my inner turmoil. Friends noticed my dark circles, my distracted demeanor. I explained it away as work stress. No one suspected the truth. No one could. It was isolation in plain sight. A glimmer of hope. Despite the overwhelming pressure, small victories began emerging. Matthew corrected his investments before major losses occurred. Claire's friend was revealed to have been scamming others as well, and the intervention I had orchestrated prevented total financial collapse. But the mirror was unforgiving. It showed me the future beyond these minor successes, a cascade of events that could still destroy us if I failed to anticipate the next move. Every reflection became a puzzle, every family interaction a potential threat or opportunity. I began keeping detailed notes: dates, behaviors, conversations, financial flows. I cross-referenced them with the visions in the mirror. I realized something terrifying yet vital. I wasn't just fighting against financial ruin, I was fighting against inevitability itself. The mirror had shown me a future that could happen, but it had not guaranteed that it would. My actions were now the only barrier between disaster and survival. Yet the moral cost weighed heavily. Every preemptive act, every subtle deception, every manipulation of trust left me questioning whether I was truly saving my family or whether I was becoming the architect of their eventual downfall. By the end of the second week, I had learned one immutable truth. Knowing the future doesn't guarantee control over it. It only intensifies responsibility, magnifies fear, and tests the boundaries of morality in ways no ordinary choice could. And the mirror's reflection never wavered. It showed me every consequence of failure in vivid, inescapable detail. I was no longer a child climbing the attic stairs out of curiosity. I was a guardian standing between my family and the storm of betrayal and financial ruin, a storm whose exact path I had glimpsed, but whose severity I could still shape. The attic had become my sanctuary and my prison. Every night I climbed the stairs, carrying a notebook full of observations, bank statements, dates, conversations, and small interventions I had orchestrated. Every night, the storm of anxiety accompanied me, even if outside the weather was calm. The mirror, wrapped in its yellowing cloth, waited patiently, as if it had been expecting me. I began noticing details I hadn't before. The carvings in the gold frame weren't random. Roses entwined with vines formed patterns that, under candlelight, resembled numbers, dates, warnings. Some looked like initials. I could swear that at times the reflections moved slightly, just a fraction faster than reality, revealing moments before they happened. The first time I realized this, I froze. I had been watching Matthew review an investment document the night before a major deal. In the mirror, I saw his hesitation before he picked up a pen. My reflection flickered, showing the moment the deal could spiral out of control if only he signed the wrong line. I leaned closer to the mirror, heart pounding. Every nerve in my body screamed, "Intervene." But that night, the mirror revealed something else, something more personal, my own future. I saw myself, not just anxious or sleepless, but actively broken. Lines etched deeper into my face, dark circles heavier, a shadow of guilt in my eyes. I realized that while I was preventing disaster for my family, the mirror predicted my own collapse from stress and obsession. The implications were terrifying. I wasn't just saving others, I was sacrificing myself. Every intervention, every small deception, every manipulation of trust was a fragment of my soul slowly eroding. The mirror didn't punish, it only reflected. But the reflection was enough to chill me to the bone. A startling discovery. One evening, I noticed something entirely new. The mirror didn't only show the family's interactions, it revealed decisions before they happened. Not all of them, but enough to see patterns I could exploit. I realized that if I could identify the key pivot points, moments that would determine the path toward betrayal or ruin, I could strategically intervene to redirect the trajectory. I called these nodes, moments where one action led to cascading consequences. A signed check, a whispered conversation, a trust given too freely. I began tracking these nodes meticulously in a journal, marking dates, locations, people, and potential outcomes. And then it happened. A new vision appeared in the mirror, different from previous ones. It wasn't financial or relational, it was psychological. A shadow figure, someone close to me, watching and waiting. The mirror reflected the possibility of intentional betrayal, someone within the family who might exploit vulnerabilities for their gain. I froze. Could the mirror show not only the path of mistakes, but also malice in motion? It was unnerving, because now the stakes were personal. I could manipulate decisions to prevent accidental failures, but malice was deliberate. Preventing it required cunning and risk. One wrong move, and I could push that shadow into action. I began testing the limits of my interventions. With Matthew, I subtly changed the order of documents, timed emails, and even rearranged the notes on his desk. Every small action was calculated to steer him away from disaster without revealing the mirror's prophecy. With Claire, I intercepted phone calls and subtly introduced new information to make her question risky decisions. I avoided outright lies, always small nudges, enough to redirect her, but not enough to betray trust. And yet, the mirror showed me something chilling. My interventions themselves were now nodes. Each time I acted, the mirror reflected potential consequences I hadn't anticipated. Small changes could ripple unpredictably, creating new vulnerabilities. One night, I noticed an image of myself arguing with my parents. I hadn't yet done it, but the mirror suggested that if I acted with too much authority, I could provoke mistrust, worsening the path I was trying to prevent. The mirror didn't dictate, it hinted. It forced me to weigh choices with terrifying precision. I realized that the battle was no longer just against betrayal or financial ruin. I was fighting time, uncertainty, and moral compromise simultaneously. The first confrontation. Then came a moment I hadn't predicted. Claire discovered my minor interference with her loan delay. She confronted me. "Why did you stop my transfer?" she demanded, eyes wide with hurt. I hesitated. Truth seemed impossible. How could I explain a mirror showing the future? I chose deception by omission. I just thought you should double check. I was worried," I said. She narrowed her eyes. "You're meddling. You don't trust me?" "I trust you," I said carefully. I can't risk mistakes that could hurt the whole family." She left the room, shaking her head, but the mirror reflected the emotional fallout. She would doubt me in subtle ways, suspicious of intentions, unknowingly opening a new node of potential betrayal. It was the first time I realized something crucial. Preventing disaster sometimes created emotional instability that could itself lead to ruin. The mirror had shown this node in advance, but I hadn't fully grasped the moral weight. The mirror's warning. One night, the mirror displayed an image I could not ignore. Myself, sitting alone in the dark, consumed by anxiety. The future me was physically shaking, journal scattered, sleepless, mentally exhausted. I realized that while I was preventing external disaster, my internal state was collapsing. The mirror's subtle message was clear. Safeguarding others does not absolve you from consequences. Every choice carried cost, not just for my family, but for me. I became hyper-aware. I tracked everything, patterns of conversation, timing, subtle behavioral cues. I recorded dates of financial decisions, hours of phone calls, emails, social media interactions. Every detail mattered. Every moment could shift the future I had seen. The tension escalated further when I realized one node, Claire's friend, had connections I hadn't anticipated.
Another betrayal loomed, not financial, but reputational. I had to act quickly, delicately. The mirror offered a glimpse of the consequences if I failed: legal action, loss of trust, and deep familial rifts. I orchestrated a careful intervention, anonymously warning Claire's friends' mutual acquaintances about suspicious activity. Within days, her plan began unraveling without implicating me. But the mirror reflected the emotional cost. Claire would still feel uncertainty, Matthew would sense interference, and my parents would notice my obsessive behavior. The mirror's reflections were teaching me a harsh lesson. There was no risk-free path. A glimmer of control? Despite the moral and emotional weight, small victories provided hope. Matthew avoided signing a disastrous deal. Claire's finances remained intact. My parents, unaware of the manipulations, continued trusting me, but tensions simmered under the surface. The mirror, however, reflected one critical truth. This was only the beginning. The future it had shown me was far from over. Each node successfully mitigated open space for new ones. Betrayal and disaster were not static. They adapted, shifted, and waited for the next opportunity. And the mirror, silent yet vivid, reminded me I was running a race against inevitability itself. By the end of part 3, I realized that while minor successes provided temporary relief, the storm of betrayal and financial collapse was far from over. Every action had consequences, and every success demanded moral and emotional sacrifice.
The air in the house had changed. It wasn't stormy, but every corner felt charged with tension. I could feel it even before checking the mirror. The first subtle signs of mistrust among my family members had begun. Glances held too long, questions asked too sharply, and an undercurrent of doubt swirling around every conversation. The mirror had shown this months before it actually happened, but knowing it was coming didn't lessen the sting. It only heightened the anticipation of pain. One evening, as I reviewed financial statements and emails in the dim light of the study, the mirror flickered. I froze, my reflection still. Then it moved, a subtle ripple, like water disturbed by an unseen hand. In the glass, I saw something I hadn't anticipated. Matthew, my own brother, signing a deal I had warned him against, but doing so with a cold calculation I hadn't seen before. I felt my stomach tighten. The mirror was showing me intentional betrayal, not a mistake or oversight, but deliberate action. Someone I trusted, plotting harm to the family's financial stability. I had to act, but cautiously. Confrontation would only accelerate the betrayal. Intervention had to be strategic, invisible, subtle. The first step was observation. I followed Matthew's every move, noting emails, meetings, phone calls. I discovered his accomplice, a financial advisor we had trusted implicitly, who had a hidden agenda of exploiting the family's funds. It was subtle, legal even, but the consequences would be catastrophic. That night, I returned to the attic. Candlelight flickered against the mirror's surface. I stared into my own eyes, haunted by the reflection of someone both determined and terrified. "You can prevent this," I whispered to myself, but at what cost? The mirror reflected a different angle, a split image of myself, older, weary, torn between duty and exhaustion. Its silent warning was clear. Prevention comes with sacrifice. The first intervention. I crafted my plan with care. I couldn't reveal the mirror, couldn't show that I had foreseen the betrayal. I had to manipulate events invisibly. I started by subtly undermining Matthew's confidence in the advisor. I left documents in plain sight, highlighted sections showing discrepancies in past deals. I made anonymous phone calls posing as concerned clients, sowing doubt. Every step had to be precise. One misstep could backfire. The mirror reflected my actions, showing multiple possible outcomes. I could see Matthew hesitating, reconsidering the deal, weighing trust and doubt. But the future was fluid. One wrong nudge could push him toward the betrayal I sought to prevent. After a week of careful orchestration, Matthew paused. The deal was delayed. The mirror reflected the tension, a fragile moment of victory, but also the creation of a new node, a moment where suspicion between brother and sister could spiral. The emotional cost was rising. I felt the weight of responsibility like never before. Not only was I preventing financial ruin, but I was also walking a moral tightrope, manipulating trust and loyalty within my family. Every action was a double-edged sword.
The next morning, Claire confronted me about subtle changes in her financial planning. My interventions had delayed certain transactions, altered priorities, and caused minor confusions. "Why are things so complicated lately?" she asked, frustration in her voice. I forced a casual tone. "Just trying to stay on top of things. You know how finances can spiral." She narrowed her eyes. "It feels like someone is interfering." The mirror's reflection warned me. Emotional consequences were rippling. My manipulations, while preventing one disaster, were creating mistrust elsewhere. Family dynamics were now volatile. I had to carefully navigate these relationships, ensuring that my interventions didn't push them toward conflict. Meanwhile, Matthew's betrayal loomed like a dark cloud. The mirror showed that his intent was not yet fully realized, but the pressure was building. He sensed interference, frustration rising. One rash decision could undo all my careful planning. A glimpse of the worst. One night, I returned to the attic, desperate for guidance. The mirror surface shimmered unnaturally. This time, it didn't show just one future. It showed multiple possibilities branching outward, like a tree of consequences. I saw Matthew going through with the deal, leading to massive financial loss. Claire taking a desperate loan to cover gaps, only to be betrayed by her friend. My parents facing bankruptcy notices, losing trust in each other and in me. Myself collapsing under stress, physically and mentally. The mirror's warning was clear. I had only one chance to intervene decisively, but the cost would be personal. I realized that small, subtle nudges were no longer sufficient. I had to take bolder action, risking suspicion, confrontation, and emotional fallout. The first bold move. I created a diversion. I presented Matthew with an urgent client opportunity requiring immediate review. The documents, carefully prepared, highlighted inconsistencies and red flags, crafted to appear as genuine oversight. Matthew hesitated. The mirror reflected him torn between instinct and doubt. I held my breath. Finally, he paused the transaction. The betrayal was prevented, for now. The financial catastrophe averted. But the mirror showed the personal cost. Matthew's trust in me was weakened. Claire's confidence was shaken. And the tension in the household was palpable. I realized something crucial. Preventing the betrayal didn't restore harmony. It simply bought time. Each intervention, no matter how precise, created new emotional nodes that required careful management. The reflection of myself in the mirror showed lines deepening, eyes darkened with sleepless nights, shoulders tense with invisible burdens. I was becoming a silent guardian, carrying the weight of a family unaware of the storm I had kept at bay, a warning from the mirror. Before leaving the attic that night, I lingered. The mirror shimmered again. This time, it didn't show faces, deals, or betrayals. It showed patterns, a network of vulnerabilities, trust fractures, and potential manipulations. I understood then, the mirror was not simply showing the future. It was revealing the architecture of consequences. Every action, every intervention, every lie or omission was a node in a vast web. One wrong move could send shockwaves through the entire family. I had glimpsed a world where I failed, a world where Matthew's betrayal triggered a cascade of financial collapse, emotional rifts, and eventual estrangement. And the mirror made it terrifyingly clear. Failure was not an option. I left the attic, heart pounding. The storm outside mirrored my inner turmoil. Rain hammered the windows, lightning flashing across the sky. But inside, I was the storm. By the end of part 4, one major betrayal had been prevented, but at immense emotional and moral cost. The mirror had revealed that the future was flexible but ruthless, and my interventions, while necessary, were creating new tensions I would need to manage.
Weeks had passed since my first interventions. The mirror had become an extension of my mind, a silent partner guiding each careful maneuver. Yet no amount of planning could prepare me for what came next. It started subtly, small inconsistencies in Claire's behavior, hesitations in conversation, muted defensiveness, and a distracted air that made me uneasy. At first, I thought it was residual tension from my previous interventions, the emotional ripples I had created. But the mirror told me otherwise. One night, I ascended to the attic, candle flickering in hand. I uncovered a horrifying truth. Claire had been contacted by someone new, someone unknown to me. The mirror showed a future where she would unwittingly share sensitive financial and personal information, which would allow a second betrayal to unfold, a betrayal far more dangerous than Matthew's planned deal. My stomach churned. The images were vivid. The emails, the hidden agreements, the casual trust given to the wrong person, all mirrored in the glass as if etched into reality before it happened. I realized that my interventions had only delayed the inevitable. The future was adaptive, relentless. The mirror reflected my own face, pale, eyes wide, jaw tight. I whispered to it, almost hoping for reassurance. I can stop this, can't I? The answer was silent but unmistakable. You must act or everything collapses. The weight of moral choice. This betrayal was different. While Matthew's was financial and deliberate, Claire's was emotional, relational, and unpredictable. Preventing it required manipulation of trust on a scale that could backfire catastrophically. I spent hours analyzing the nodes, emails, phone conversations, casual remarks, and even social media activity, all points of potential failure. The mirror showed me branching futures, one path where my intervention succeeded, one where Claire grew suspicious, and one where the betrayal escalated into a cascade of family conflict. I felt the burden pressing on me. My sleep was fragmented, my body tired, but my mind raced endlessly. Each plan I devised required absolute precision. One misstep, one wrong word, and the second betrayal could ignite a firestorm far worse than anything I had seen. Yet the mirror provided guidance. It highlighted moments, tiny, fleeting seconds, where my influence could steer events without detection. It was both a gift and a curse. A risky intervention. I chose my moment. Claire had just returned from a dinner with the person orchestrating the betrayal. I intercepted a seemingly casual conversation about investing in family ventures, which the mirror had flagged as a critical node. "I don't know if this is a good idea," I said, voice casual but firm. "You've seen how sensitive these matters can be. Maybe we should review it carefully before proceeding." She hesitated, frowning. The mirror reflected multiple possibilities. If I pushed too hard, she would distrust me. If I appeared indifferent, she would continue the betrayal. I balanced my tone perfectly, letting concern and casual reasoning coexist. The future wavered. I could see the betrayal slowing, the chain reaction bending slightly. But the mirror warned. The cost was inevitable. Emotional fallout, subtle mistrust, and tension were unavoidable.
The next morning, tension hung in the air like fog. Claire's eyes avoided mine. Matthew was silent, more withdrawn than usual. Even my parents seemed to sense that something was amiss, though they didn't know what. The mirror had shown this. Every intervention created new nodes of emotional complexity. At breakfast, my mother finally asked, voice trembling slightly, "Is everything all right? You seem distracted." I forced a smile. Just work stress, nothing more. But the mirror reflected the cracks forming, subtle suspicion, emotional distance, silent questions. I realized that preventing disaster was not enough. I also had to repair the relational damage caused by my interventions. I spent the day carefully managing interactions, softening tense exchanges, and subtly reinforcing trust. Each conversation required strategy. Phrasing, timing, and tone had to match the mirror's predictions perfectly. One wrong word, one misjudged emotion, and the second betrayal could spiral beyond my control. Escalating pressure. Despite my efforts, the mirror continued to show disturbing futures. Claire's confidant was now more aggressive, pushing for commitments and exploiting minor vulnerabilities. Matthew, aware of my interventions, was growing restless, and small disagreements threatened to explode into conflict. I realized the enormity of the task. I wasn't just preventing financial disaster. I was navigating a minefield of emotional fragility, trust, and latent malice. Every success carried hidden consequences, every small victory a shadow of tension waiting to unfold. The mirror reflected my exhaustion. Lines deepened on my face, eyes darkened with sleepless nights, hands trembling slightly as I wrote notes, tracked nodes, and orchestrated interventions. I was becoming a silent sentinel, guarding my family against futures they could not imagine, sacrifices hidden behind calm appearances. A glimmer of hope and fear. Late that night in the attic, I paused. The mirror reflected me sitting cross-legged on the floor, head in hands, journal open, candles flickering. I realized something profound. Despite the pressure, I had gained a measure of control. The nodes were bending, betrayals delayed, and small victories achieved. But the mirror whispered, silently, control was fragile. The future was a living network of cause and effect, adapting to each of my moves. One mistake, one miscalculation, could unravel everything. The reflection showed Claire laughing in an image that wasn't yet real, Matthew sighing with relief, and my parents unaware of the narrow margins by which disaster had been avoided. But it also showed me older, worn, and isolated, carrying the burden of choices no one else would understand. By the end of Part 5, the second major betrayal had been delayed,
trust manipulated, and tension managed, but at immense psychological, moral, and emotional cost. The mirror's lessons were clear. The future could be bent, but never controlled entirely. And the next challenge would test every boundary of loyalty, morality, and courage.
The house was quiet, too quiet. Weeks of tension, interventions, and constant vigilance had culminated in a fragile equilibrium. Matthew's near betrayal had been averted. Claire's friends' schemes had been quietly dismantled. The financial storm was, for now, held at bay. Yet the mirror's reflection told me that the storm's calm was deceptive, fleeting. I climbed the attic stairs one last time before confronting the future head-on. Candlelight danced across the gold frame, casting patterns that looked like fragile threads of fate. The mirror shimmered, as if aware that I had learned everything it could show, and then it revealed something I had not expected, a full vision of the path I had walked, the sacrifices, the moral compromises, and the emotional toll. I saw myself in multiple stages, hunched over journals, sleepless nights etched deep into my face, eyes haunted by every choice made to protect a family unaware of the danger. I saw Matthew and Claire, relieved yet subtly changed by my interventions. I saw my parents, peaceful but blissfully ignorant of the near catastrophes avoided. And finally, I saw the reflection I had long dreaded, myself alone, isolated by knowledge, carrying burdens no one could share. It was the mirror's final lesson. Knowledge of the future came at a cost. Power to change events existed, but it demanded courage, precision, and moral reckoning. And most painfully, it required solitude, the quiet burden of silent guardianship. The confrontation. I realized the final step was not just intervention, but honesty and emotional transparency. Secrets had piled up like bricks, building walls between my family and me. I had avoided confrontation out of fear that the truth would cause more harm than good, but the mirror reflected a critical insight. Hiding the truth indefinitely would eventually erode the trust I sought to preserve. I called the family into the study, my voice steady, though my heart raced. Matthew, Claire, and my parents gathered, eyes wide with curiosity and concern. "There's something I need to explain," I began, taking a deep breath. "Over the past weeks, I've noticed situations that could have caused harm to the family. Financial mistakes, misjudgments, and outside influences. I took steps to prevent them. I acted, sometimes without explanation, to protect everyone." Silence followed. My parents looked confused, Claire frowned, and Matthew's jaw tightened. The mirror reflected this tension vividly, showing that even revelation carried risk. "But why?" Matthew finally asked, voice low. "Why interfere? Why not trust us?" I met his gaze, steady and honest. "Because I saw what could happen. I knew the consequences of inaction, and I realized that sometimes the burden of knowledge requires action, even if it risks mistrust or conflict." The room was tense. My siblings exchanged glances, weighing my words. I could feel the moral weight pressing down, but the mirror showed a possible path: understanding, forgiveness, and acknowledgement of the unseen sacrifices. The following hours were filled with raw honesty. Matthew admitted his own doubts and insecurities, confessing that he had been tempted by risky deals, unaware of the magnitude of potential consequences. Claire acknowledged her misjudgment in trusting her friend and thanked me indirectly for subtle guidance. My parents, initially shocked, gradually comprehended the scale of the interventions. Their surprise shifted into gratitude, tinged with relief. The tension in the household, heavy for weeks, began to lift. The mirror reflected smiles, genuine, cautious, yet real. Yet the most profound revelation came when I stared into my own reflection. I saw the toll of the journey: dark circles, tense shoulders, and eyes weighted with sleepless vigilance. But I also saw something I hadn't noticed before: strength, resilience, and the courage to face consequences without faltering. The mirror, silent and still, seemed to approve, acknowledging the moral fortitude required to protect loved ones. The mirror's final gift. For the first time, the mirror did not show branching futures, cascading consequences, or nodes of betrayal. It showed possibility, a calm reflection of a family intact, relationships strengthened by honesty, and lessons learned through careful intervention.
I realized that the mirror's power had never been about inevitability. It was about awareness, the ability to see potential outcomes, understand risk, and act with courage and moral clarity. The future was never fixed. It was a web of possibilities shaped by choices, ethics, and action. I removed the cloth from the mirror, letting the light of the attic fall fully upon its surface. It no longer reflected fear or inevitable betrayal. It reflected possibility, resilience, and hope. I understood then that the burden of knowledge could be transformed into empowerment, but only when wielded with integrity, care, and courage. Moving forward, the following weeks were a period of healing and reconstruction. Relationships slowly stabilized. Matthew, Claire, and my parents grew more open with one another, addressing concerns and acknowledging the subtle protections that had guided them. The financial stability of the family was restored, and the shadows of near betrayals receded. I too healed, but differently. I had carried the weight of foresight, the moral responsibility of intervention, and the emotional toll of acting as a silent guardian. The mirror had taught me that knowledge is power, but only when tempered by wisdom and ethical courage. I returned the mirror to its place in the attic, draped once more in cloth. It no longer haunted me. It had fulfilled its purpose, not to dictate destiny, but to illuminate the path through which destiny could be shaped responsibly. For the first time in months, I could breathe freely. The house felt lighter, warmer, filled with laughter and subtle acknowledgments of what had been preserved. I realized that the mirror's lessons are eternal. Knowledge comes with responsibility. Foresight demands courage, and love for family requires both sacrifice and honesty. The final reflection. One evening, alone in the attic, I gazed into the mirror for the last time. My reflection smiled faintly, older, wiser, tempered by experience and moral clarity. I whispered softly, "Thank you for guidance, for warning, and for showing me what it truly means to protect those we love." The mirror shimmered, a final acknowledgement, and then remained still. I left the attic, leaving the past, the betrayals, and the lessons behind. The family was whole, the future uncertain but safe, and I understood that true guardianship does not demand recognition. It demands courage, integrity, and the willingness to carry burdens silently. The mirror had shown me a future I desperately feared, but it had also revealed the capacity within myself to navigate, protect, and preserve what truly mattered. And that, I realized, was a gift beyond measure.